so he's going to be presenting from home today. But my name is Dave Wenrick. I'm with Florida East Coast Railway in the Maintenance Way Department. I wanted to give a big thank you to Railtech for hosting us today. And thanks to Tom for inviting me to present along with him. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview on FEC. We're a 351-mile network from Jacksonville to Miami, class 4 track, 60-mile-an-hour railroad. Our primary commodities are southbound priority intermodal and northbound aggregate. We run about 42 to 43 MGT. Next slide, please. So again, talking about the infrastructure that we have in place and hosting Brightline on our railroad and getting ready for that infrastructure. Just give you a little history on FEC. So we've got a pretty pioneering spirit. This is the railroad that Henry Flagler built that developed much of Florida's East Coast. That railroad wound up going all the way to Key West once upon a time. Obviously, that doesn't still exist today, which is a real bummer. It'll be a lot of fun to high rail that. Some other fun things that we've done in the past, we built the railroad for NASA and maintained that for a number of years to support space operations and bring in rocket boosters and fun things like that in. We're an early adopter of concrete ties, and we've got those deployed all across our network, which we'll get into a lot more here in just a minute. We're the first railroad to use the Train device. We deployed ATC across our network in the 80s. Some of the more fun things we've done recently, we're using liquid natural gas as a fuel for our through freights. Pretty neat thing, and our sister company Ferromex is actually starting to do the same thing here soon as well. And soon we'll be supporting Class 6 operations as Brightline makes their way up to Orlando. So lots of fun things going on at FEC. Next slide, please. Talking a little bit about our infrastructure. I won't go through all these details, but I'll focus in on the concrete ties piece. So I will say that all these numbers here are pre-Brightline Phase 2. So when I say Brightline Phase 2, Tom will get more into this, but that section is from West Palm up to Cocoa. So about 120, 130 miles segment there. But well over 1 million concrete ties, close to 5 million fasteners. And basically all of our network is concrete tie with the exception of turnouts, class 4 and below, our yards, and then all of our grade crossings. Those are all timber. Our traffic, again, southbound intermodal, northbound aggregate. We pride ourselves on fast service, great delivery to our customers. So it's important that we keep our network in tip-top shape. Our environment is hot, muggy, and buggy. Florida is a pretty rough environment, especially for anything wood or timber. So we're really well positioned to be a good concrete tie candidate. Next slide, please. All right, so a little bit about the concrete tie history at FEC. So why did we switch? So in the 60s, management changed at FEC. They looked at a number of cost-cutting measures, and there's been a lot of maintenance, or spending a lot of money on maintenance of concrete or of timber ties. I apologize, timber ties. They're replacing them every 8 to 12 years, is what I'm hearing from some of the folks that I was able to interview. So they started looking at deploying concrete ties. They engaged an engineer named Mr. Frederick. He was an old chemical engineer, did a lot of work with steam locomotives and boiler treatments, things of that nature. He came up with a few cross-tie designs, and they started testing them with a nearby manufacturer. And soon thereafter, I'm not sure the exact story, but FEC wound up manufacturing themselves. So I'm not sure what happened to that manufacturer, but FEC wound up manufacturing ties in both New Smyrna and in Jacksonville. They continued to manufacture ties until the mid-90s. And that tie you see there in the pictures, that they settled on that design in the early 70s. And prior to shutting down all the manufacturing, they made enough inventory to be able to replace all the concrete ties on all the curves on the network. Next slide, please. So I know these pictures are a bit grainy, so apologies, but these were the original drawings I found, which are really cool. Anybody wants to come see me at one of the breaks, I brought them with me, which will probably get me in trouble, but they're really cool. So I thought some people might enjoy seeing them. But just put those up there. I've got a little bit to say about them. So the concrete ties have a really high granite content. I got some conflicting numbers on the strength. Some people said 5,000 psi, some people said 8,000 psi, but regardless, a pretty high strength tie. Stainless steel inserts. So really a well-built tie. When they did the conversion in the 60s and 70s, what they would do is FEC was primarily a double track mainline, so they'd take one track out of service, and at that time they upgraded everything to CWR and put concrete ties in, and then the sections that were going to remain double track or put a siding in, they'd kind of swap over and do the other track, but a lot of it went to single track at that time as well. So really a time of transition for the railroad. They had a number of different tie designs they experimented with. I heard that there was some ties that had really skinny center sections, like in the gauge. Also some self-tamping ties. I wish I had more information about that. I'd really love to see what a self-tamping tie looks like. But like I said, they experiment with a number of different things. They experiment with limestone. Limestone is readily available in Florida. Again, that's one of our primary commodities. But they decided to go with concrete for the high strength. So. Next slide, please. Some more drawings up here. Again, happy to share these with folks if you want to stop by and take a look. But these are some of the plans for doing the pull-out testing on the inserts, as well as looking at how to accommodate for rail seat abrasion and keeping that rail seat nice and sturdy. So some pretty cool drawings. Next slide, please. And another one there. All right, next slide, please. And then today, so today we've got a number of different concrete ties. Like I said, we stopped producing ties in the mid-90s, started purchasing other ties either in the late 90s or early 2000s. So we've got really quite the mix of manufacturers out there and an even better mix of fasteners. So that makes changing out ties very interesting when you've got many different types of fasteners. So a lot of times when we change out ties, we'll make several passes over the same, same piece of track, because we'll be set up for this type of fastener this day and then this type of fastener another day. So definitely presents some challenges to us. Essentially, we got two different types or different profiles of tie out there. So the FEC tie is a little bit shorter. We considered our low profile tie. It kind of fits what a typical transit or passenger tie would look like. We've also got the full profile, which are deeper ties. And those have gone in places where we've either added a second main line, especially with a lot of the work that Brightline has done, or just done a full replacement in a particular area. Wanted to highlight down here on the bottom, I've got two different types of fasteners there. So those are both FEC made concrete ties. On the right side, we've got the tab style. That's the original that was designed by FEC. And then on the left side there, we've got what we call the FEC Retro in-house, but it's like a modified SKL, I believe is the right term for it. And that's what Brightline is doing as they upgrade a lot of our infrastructure today when they put in new rail and whatnot. So like I said, a lot of different types of fasteners, a lot of interesting stuff going on out there. Concrete ties have held up really well for us. So we've got, of the 1.2, 1.3 million out there, I would say well over 500,000 are still the original FEC made concrete ties. We typically replace 16,000 ties a year. So if you do the math, that works out to, we expect to get 75 to 80 years out of a concrete tie, which is really amazing. From a maintenance standpoint, we run a bolt gang that we replace fasteners and pads about once every 20 years. We've also got a pretty robust surfacing program as well. So, we definitely spend money to maintain the ties, but we see that we get a really good, really high quality product, and it supports us to be able to run freight to meet our customers' demands. Next slide, please. Real quick, I'll just give a quick thank you to Charles Stone, Gary Clegg for giving us a lot of information on their previous chief engineers, a lot of information for today's program, and Jeff Roden, who actually worked in our tie plant. So without any further ado, I'll hand it off to Tom, who'll talk about all kinds of fun stuff with Brightline.
Great. Thanks so much, David. Give me just a moment while I switch presentations. All right. Can you all see my slides all right? And can you hear me okay?
Yep, we got it. Thanks, Tom.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks so much, everybody. And I apologize again. I'm less than a mile away from you all, but in COVID quarantine, unfortunately. So bummed not to be with you all, but excited that I can still present. And hopefully we can chat virtually or via phone after. But again, I'm Tom Roadcap with Brightline, former Railtech U of I student as well. Now working on Brightline's expansion in Florida from Miami and West Palm Beach to Orlando, and also working closely with David and the FEC team as we do that. So Brightline, if you're not familiar with Brightline, we're a private passenger rail company, basically trying to reimagine what it means to travel by train in America. We're the only major provider of modern, eco-friendly high-speed rail in the United States. And the main project that we'll be discussing today is our Brightline Florida project, which is connecting South Florida with Orlando and eventually Tampa in the state of Florida. But we also have a second project that I'll touch on at the end, Brightline West, connecting Southern California to Las Vegas. Our company goal is essentially to connect city pairs that are too long to drive and too short to fly. We think there's huge opportunity existing in the United States right now to connect those markets, and some examples of those are shown on the screen. I've got a couple of videos that I'm actually going to skip in the interest of time, but we've got them on YouTube. So if you want to see those videos later, again, just get in touch with me. I've got my email at the end of the presentation, and you can watch the videos at your leisure, but they're just overviews of Brightline and of our construction operations. Just a little about our operation itself quick before we dive into the construction and the ties and fastenings. These are our train sets. Again, you may have seen they're manufactured by Siemens in Sacramento, California. Totally ADA accessible, level boarding. They've got all the newest features, and part of operating the service that we operate currently from Miami to West Palm Beach. Here again, you can see some pictures, touch-free bathrooms, ADA accessible outlets and USB ports, food cart service, bike racks, all the things that modern passenger rail rider should and would expect. Here's a little bit about our stations. So we currently, again, operate stations in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach, and our train service is operating today, connecting those. In South Florida also, we are in the process of adding additional stops at Aventura, Florida, and Boca Raton, Florida, and those stations should be done soon. And then we're also further in the process of expanding to Orlando as part of the phase 2 program, which I'll be talking about today. I don't have a slide on it, but we are also pioneering a door-to-door passenger experience. So passengers that need to get that last mile to or from our stations can do so with Brightline Plus, which is essentially a ride-share service, a Tesla golf cart shuttle type service that takes our passengers to and from the station and is included in their ticket. So let's talk a little bit about the construction that we're doing along the FEC corridor, and as well as our new construction. So again, what we call phase 1 is the first piece of the Brightline Florida project that went into service in 2017, 2018, connecting Miami and West Palm Beach. There's a picture of one of our trains leaving the Miami Central Station. That operates essentially entirely on the Florida East Coast Railway corridor, which previously was primarily single track, and we double tracked as part of opening that service. And that operates at a maximum speed of 79 miles an hour, so it's class 4 track. Then we have phase 2, which is our expansion to Orlando, the first 130 miles of which is also going to operate on the Florida East Coast Railway corridor, a section that for construction purposes we call Zone 4, and it's going to be a maximum speed of 110 miles an hour. Also, the existing is primarily single track that we're double tracking. There you can see some photos of the in progress work where you've got the brand new second track in place and the existing track yet to be upgraded. But this will be class 6 operations, and the work should be completed at the end of this year with service opening next year. The other piece of our phase 2 expansion, what we call zones 1, 2, and 3 for construction purposes, will connect the Orlando International Airport over to the FEC corridor at Cocoa. So that's brand new build, brand new high-speed line, about 40 miles long with a maximum train speed of 125 miles an hour. That follows the 528 Beachline Expressway corridor. So it's brand new build. And our main contractors for that work are Wharton, Smith, Middlesex, and Granite, as well as Hubbard, who's not shown here. But here you can see some photos of that work. You can see in the top picture our tracks weaving underneath several of the airport runways as you leave our Orlando Airport station. And then at the bottom, again, some brand new track being built in the I-95 and 528 corridors there. So again, I'll skip the videos in the interest of time, but again, if you want to see those videos, just get in touch with me and I can share them with you afterward. But a little bit about the numbers of our phase 2 construction to Orlando. We've got over 1,000 people working on the project every day. And in fact, these days, most days are in the neighborhood of 1,200 to 1,300 people working on the project every day. We're building 58 new bridges. Some of these are for double tracking the existing FEC corridor. Some existing FEC bridges we're also replacing entirely. So we're essentially building 2 new bridges. And then on the new high-speed piece from Cocoa over to Orlando, we're also building obviously all new bridges. So 58 new bridges total, conservatively 1 million square feet of walls. One new vehicle maintenance facility just south of the airport in Orlando where we will maintain our trains, and there's an aerial image of the progress on that facility. If you fly into or out of Orlando, often this is the first thing you see when you take off or land to the south. There's a lot of grade crossings on the FEC corridor, so there's 157 grade crossings that we have to rebuild as part of this project. There you can see some photos of some finished ones. We're also adding a lot of safety improvements such as exit gates, medians, vehicle presence detection radars, so on and so forth at these crossings to make them safe for operation of trains at 110 miles an hour. We've split the 130 miles of FEC right-of-way that we're upgrading for this project into 20 different signal cutover segments. As David mentioned, FEC installed ATC in the 1980s, and we were using that system as well as an overlay PTC system that we cut over piece by piece in 20 different segments. There's 150 miles of upgrades to existing FEC track, and that can be anything from replacing ties or rail to get the track up to Class 6 standards, as well as a lot of shifting the track to reduce curvature to be able to get those 110 mile an hour speeds. There's 157 miles of new track, 108 of those are on zone 4, so on the FEC piece. 1.7 million tons of ballast that we'll be placing as part of the construction. Most of it has been delivered by rail so far, and some of it's been delivered by truck. Unfortunately, we're having some service issues with our Class 1 delivery partners, so we're going to start receiving ballast by ship to Port Canaveral here shortly and trucking it to the project. Just to give you a more clear picture of how some of these tie and fasting upgrades work on the FEC corridor. So here's an example photo. On the right, you can see the existing FECR main line. A lot of that main line is built with the ties that David just talked about, existing FECR ties produced in the 70s. Many of them are in great condition, and we are very glad that we don't have to touch them. But there are, some ties that are not in as good shape, and we want to get the railroad in great shape to start our service. So we're installing new ties to replace those in the existing FECR track. Those are the low profile ties that David talked about that will get the track up to Class 6. And then there's, of course, the new second main track being built by us that has all new ties, full depth ties. So a little bit more detail about those ties. We're installing 450,000 new mainline ties. These are all being produced by Rockla Vossloh in a dedicated plant in Fort Pierce. In fact, there's probably some folks in the room there that have worked quite a bit on this project from Vossloh and Rockla. But all of these ties have the W30M fastenings, which is a pretty standard W30 mainline tie fastening. Then for those tie replacements on the existing FEC track, we're expecting to install about 57,000 new low profile ties with the Vossloh W32. And for those of you familiar with the large construction projects like this, again, 150 miles of FEC track that we're using, 57,000 is a low number. So that tells you just how good the tie condition really is on the Florida East Coast Railway, and how well these ties, many of which are 50 years old or more, have held up so well. It's really a success story for concrete ties. But there's some images of the tie gang putting in some of those new low profile ties. Then there are also sections of track that still have 112-pound rail. These are mainly sidings that we want to upgrade to be able to use for the double track. And so we have to upgrade that rail from 112-pound to 136-pound, which means rail relay, which means we need to install those retrofit clips that David mentioned, the W30Rs, in order to be able to install the wider base rail. So we're installing 73,000 of those retrofit clips as part of the project. And there's some images of those. I figured you might enjoy if I just touch briefly on the challenges we've had with ties and fastenings. Probably the main one, honestly, is storage. It's a little bit related to the way we set the construction project up. So the project is using owner supplied material, where Brightline buys all of the ties, rail, and fastenings, and then supplies them to our contractor. But we bought them significantly ahead of when the contractor actually needed them. So we've ended up having to store ties all over the place around and along the project. And again, there's probably some folks from Vossloh in the room that can testify to how cramped their plant space has been with ties and storage. And then other than that, I mean, the products we've been receiving have been really, really high quality, and we've been really happy with them. Most of the challenges that we've seen have just been related to, the construction process itself, whether it's driving a loader over a track that hasn't been surfaced yet and breaking a tie, like you can see in the bottom right, shifting the track too far in one go, like you can see in the bottom left, and damaging the angle guide plates, top, middle. If you de-stress the rail, sometimes if it's a really cold day, the rail moves a lot and you get the pads sliding out along with the rail. All of these are pretty typical for construction though, and easy to fix, to be expected. So that covers the ties and fastenings. Let's talk about the special track work a little bit as well. So we have to install quite a few crossovers along the entire alignment to keep the network fluidity up. So it's double track with these frequent crossovers will allow Brightline trains, FEC trains to pass each other and keep everything moving. So we have 43 new number 24 crossover turnouts, and then another additional 5 number 24s that are basically used for yard leads. And those are a 60-mile-an-hour turnout. So 60 miles an hour is full track speed for the freight trains. So the freight trains will be able to cross between tracks or into the yard leads at full speed. And this video I will show because it's brief, but this is just a video of one of these major turnout installs that we had to do also at the end of a siding, which made it complicated. So we had to run trains on the main line while we got the siding track ready. Now what you're looking at is the siding track in service while we have the main line out of service. We're running freight trains along the siding track, and then we are installing a new number 24 crossover in the main line under traffic conditions, getting everything ready. And this is also, to make things even more complicated, part of a signal cutover that we had to do in order to keep this functioning as an end of siding and keeping the trains running while we were doing the work. So this all occurred over 2 days, and you can kind of get the sense of just what an intricate choreography is required to be able to do some of this work on an active mainline track. And there you can see the finished product. So overall, 152 new turnouts, including those crossover turnouts for the project. One of those is a number 32.75 turnout. This is on the new high-speed piece from Cocoa over to Orlando, so it's Brightline traffic only. But this has a movable point frog. Trains will operate through this at 80 miles an hour through the diverging route and 125 through the straight route. We're excited to start using this new turnout. Just like I talked about tide and fasting challenges, turnout challenges in general, we've been really happy with the turnouts we've been receiving. You know, the main challenge is honestly just keeping freight traffic moving while we have to install all of these new turnouts in the main line. On the right there, you can see a picture where we installed a turnout one day and ballast arrived late and the FEC freight arrived early. And we ended up having to walk the train over the turnout. And this sort of thing occurs more frequently than we would like, but it's just a fact of life during the construction. And, you know, it's what you have to do to keep freight traffic moving. A lot of South Florida is relying on FEC's freight to arrive on time, and we can't get in the way of that. So one other challenge that we've had is getting the right guard check gauge with heavy point frogs, which is too complicated to explain here, but it's Brightline's own fault. And I'd be happy to talk with anybody who wants to learn more about that later, but we've got a fix for that now and have solved the problem. Just a few other quick notes for you before I wrap up here. Other ties and fastings we're using, there's still some bridges remaining along the FEC corridor that are currently open timber deck and will remain open timber deck. And we are replacing all of the tie decks on those bridges. So we're buying actually quite a few wood ties as well as concrete ties. And then all the grade crossings, as David mentioned too, use timber ties. So we're replacing a lot of timber ties for those grade crossings, and we're installing new at that work. Then there's some Brightline only trackage where only our trains run in stations, specifically in the Miami station on the left and the Orlando station on the right that use direct fixation track. So we've got a little direct fixation track, and then our yards where we maintain the Brightline trains also use steel ties to save ballast. So we've got a little bit of everything out there. Last thing I wanted to mention is just that, again, this is not our only project. Brightline is also in the planning and working up, you know, prepping everything for the Southern California to Las Vegas Brightline West project, which we're really excited to start soon. It's going to be a true high-speed project, trains operating almost up to 200 miles an hour, primarily along Interstate 15 between the LA Basin and Las Vegas. And so with that, I'd like to thank everybody for your time. I apologize again that I'm not there in person. I wish I was with you all. Here's my email, troadcap@Brightline West. Just let me know if you have any questions or want to talk more. And with that, I will conclude. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom.
Time for one question. One burning question.
Go ahead.
Second track that is Florida East Coast with the Brightline, was that one right away already owned by Florida East Coast? Or was that,
Most of it's already owned right away by Florida East Coast. There's a few spots, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong here, a few spots where some additional right of way was required for making, you know, some of these wider curves to accommodate higher speeds, but predominantly on FEC on right of way. Yes, thank you.